Welcome everyone to our training on Skype for Business to Microsoft Teams. This is a 4-part training series covering the upgrade from Skype for Business to Microsoft Teams. My name is Brian Nice. I am a Principal Program Manager within our Teams Engineering, Customer, and Partner team. Before we dive in, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. Some additional resources include additional modules that can be found at aka.ms/Teams Academy. Additionally, we're looking for 2 types of feedback. For feedback on this session, you can go to aka.ms/Teams Community, create a new post, and add the IT Pro training tag. This will allow us to easily find your feedback for this session. If you're looking to provide feedback for various features of the Teams product itself, you can go to aka.ms/Teams Feedback. Keep in mind that Teams and Office 365 evolve constantly, so you should stay up to date on our blog at aka.ms/Teams blog. The slide also indicates the current version of this presentation. You are currently in part 4, configuring the upgrade, the IT admin point of view. In this training, we're going to cover configure the upgrade from the admin's point of view. Now, the 4 previous agenda points that you see here were covered in prior trainings that we did on the Skype to Teams upgrade. Some key learnings for this particular section. Admins have the capability of self-serving, either through their own IT admin or through a partner administrator, or they could take advantage of the Microsoft facilitated upgrade process to drive the upgrade from Skype to Microsoft Teams. The coexistence modes that are used to control the upgrade experience can be assigned through either the modern portal or the Skype for Business and Teams Admin Center or PowerShell. And these modes are able to be assigned either per user or tenant-wide. Now let's look at configuring the upgrade. A quick recap on the mechanics of the upgrade. To upgrade a user means to assign the Teams upgrade policy of Teams only to this particular user. Now that particular user must already have their account in Skype for Business Online. It is not possible to assign a Teams upgrade policy of Teams only mode to a user that has their Skype for Business account on premises. What changes when we assign this coexistence mode? Well, the routing of all of their calls and chats will go to Teams, regardless of where it was initiated. The Skype for Business client is optimized to a meetings only mode. Your meeting scheduling now moves to Teams. So in Outlook, for example, your Teams add-in gets enabled. So all new meetings that you create are Teams meetings, and your Skype for Business add-in gets disabled. Your presence becomes made available to Skype for Business users as controlled by Teams. So when you're in Teams only mode, Teams is the owner of presence. Contact migration gets triggered at your next Teams logon. This is to ensure that we capture any changes from your Skype for Business buddy list and import them into Teams. The Outlook people cards will then be updated to invoke Teams functionality for chat, calling, and presence. This includes the presence bubbles that you would see throughout your Office applications. And your HID preferences, your human interface device preferences. That's, for example, your headset and being able to click the mute button or the hang up button, things of that nature. Your HID preferences for inputs on your audio devices will be updated to reflect Teams as the primary application. So let's talk about the data migration aspects when we go from Skype for Business to Teams. So let's look at contacts first. Contacts are actually copied from the Skype for Business environment in 2 phases. At first logon to Teams, your contacts are copied from Skype for Business Online into Microsoft Teams. At the next Teams logon after you have been fully upgraded to Teams, that is, you've been assigned the Teams only coexistence mode, we'll do another sync for you. We'll do another copy of the contacts to Teams. We'll merge any contacts from the Skype for Business world with your existing contacts in Teams. And at that point, Teams is now the authoritative source for your contacts. Now, there's a couple of things to be aware of with users that are homed in Skype for Business Server or Skype on premises. Your contacts are moved to Skype for Business Online as part of Move CS User, and then the above logic is relied upon. That means that none of your contacts that are in Skype for Business will show up in the Teams client until the user has been upgraded to the Teams only mode. So if you happen to be using the full side-by-side approach with a user that is on premises in Skype for Business Server, you're not initially going to see all of the contacts in the Teams application. From a meetings perspective, the user meetings are migrated from Skype for Business to Teams using the meeting migration service. Now, the meeting migration service has been around for a number of years, and it will update a user's existing meetings under certain circumstances. When a user is migrated from on-premises to the cloud, MMS will kick in and migrate their meetings. And that was true even in just the Skype for Business world. So when you went from Skype for Business Server to Skype for Business Online, MMS would automatically kick in because we had to change the join URL, to match the Office 365 service. MMS also kicks in when an admin makes a change to the user's audio conferencing settings. Again, that was something very frequent that we saw in the Skype for Business world if you went from, say, the third-party audio conferencing provider over to the Microsoft audio conferencing service. Administrators also had the capability, and still do have the capability, of using PowerShell, the start-CSX meeting migration commandlet, to manually kick off the meeting migration service. And very recently, we've added the capability when a user has the Teams-only coexistence mode granted to them, or the Skype for Business with Teams Collab and Meetings coexistence mode, also known as Meetings First. When either of those coexistence modes are applied to a user, we will automatically kick MMS in and convert the existing organized Skype for Business meetings to Microsoft Teams meetings. So this is some additional functionality that we've added on top of what MMS has already been doing for many years. You do have the capability of controlling this from an administrative perspective, so you can turn MMS on or off, turn it on for specific scenarios, run it for individual users, and so forth. But there are a few things to be aware of when it comes to MMS. First, we need Exchange Online for MMS to do its thing. If your organization has Exchange on premises today, we have capabilities within the client for us to do client-side meeting conversion with the add-in inside of Outlook, but MMS, we're still working to extend that to support Exchange on premises. This doesn't work when we enable users for third-party ACP. Well, third-party ACP has been retired anyway, so that's really kind of moot. We don't use this as a migration mechanism to go back to Skype for Business. And it's also important to note that MMS kicks in when we apply these coexistence modes to individual users. If we apply the coexistence mode to an entire tenant, we don't kick in the MMS process. So if you change the entire tenant's coexistence mode over to Teams only as an example, you'd want to go out in PowerShell and run the start CSX meeting migration commandlet to be able to kick that off for all of the users. Let's take a look at some considerations that are specific to organizations that have Skype for Business Server on premises. First and foremost, if we want to have the most transparent migration possible from Skype for Business Server on premises to Teams, we must enable hybrid to start moving our users into the Teams only coexistence mode. Now, this includes a couple of things. First, it includes ensuring that we have the proper synchronization happening between our on-premises Active Directory and Azure Active Directory. This includes ensuring that we synchronize the MS RTT SIP attributes properly. There are some organizations that do synchronize their on-prem AD to Azure AD, but they do not choose to sync these RTC SIP attributes. We need to make sure that these attributes are properly synchronized to the service. This ensures that the Teams environment recognizes and realizes that there is an on-premises Skype for Business deployment as part of what the organization is rolling out. Now, this hybrid also includes configuring what we commonly refer to as split domain, which is the sharing of the SIP domain between the on-premises Skype for Business deployment as well as the Office 365 tenant. Now, organizations that have a heavy footprint and deployment of Skype for Business server, they're not restricted from giving those Skype for Business server users the Teams application, but there's a few caveats to be aware of. First and foremost, while a user has their Skype for Business account on premises, you cannot put that particular user into the Teams only coexistence mode. We will actually block this as part of the Grant CS Teams Upgrade Policy commandlet, or if you try to do this through the Teams Admin Center. They cannot be placed into Teams only mode. Additionally, if you do distribute the Teams application to them in this full side-by-side mode, they will not have the ability to do interop or federation from their Teams client. They will have to use their Skype for Business client for this. Now you can go back to the section, the training that we did earlier on coexistence and interoperability if you want to get all of the gory details about why that is. But just recall, if you are going to allow the user to do full side-by-side with their Teams application while that user has their Skype for Business account on premises, they will have this restriction in place for Teams. Now, how do we get to Teams from the Skype for Business on-premises environment? Well, there's actually two processes you can do. There's a one-step migration where you simply utilize the move-cs user commandlet with the -move to Teams parameter. That commandlet is actually available in Server 2019, as well as CU8 and higher for Server 2015. This one-step commandlet will actually take the user's Skype for Business account from the on-premises environment, move it into Office 365, and automatically assign the Teams-only coexistence mode. We'll also ensure that we convert their meetings from Skype for Business meetings to Teams meetings. If you don't have Server 2019 or you don't have CU8 or better for Server 2015, and you don't have any mechanism to install the admin tools with those particular versions, then you can always do the two-step approach, which is just simply use move-cs user to move the user from on-premises Skype for Business to Skype for Business Online, much like you would have in any previous migration from on-prem to online, and then go ahead and assign the Teams upgrade policy of upgrade to Teams, which is the Teams only coexistence mode. That two-step process effectively ends up with the same end results as the one-step process, and that is to ensure that the user is placed into the service in Office 365. They are assigned the Teams only coexistence mode, and we then take any meetings that were organized by them in Skype for Business and convert them to Microsoft Teams meetings. Now, as we look at the upgrade itself from an IT perspective, there's really two options that we have from an upgrade track. There's the customer-driven track where the customer decides that they are ready to go to Teams. They determine the time frame and all the goodness that's around that, and then the customer and/or the partner actually turns the levers and pulls the nerd knobs and so forth that allow the upgrade to happen. The other option is what we call the Microsoft facilitated automated upgrade process, where it's an advantage in a service that Microsoft can offer, where Microsoft will do the upgrade process for you. The key difference here is how the migration itself is initiated, right? The end user experience, the underlying core mechanics, all the pieces we've talked about up to this point are essentially the same. Really, the only difference is how the migration gets initiated, whether it's the customer or the partner that pulls the levers, or whether it's Microsoft. From the customer perspective, obviously the target here is the larger online organizations, maybe folks that have dedicated Skype admins, any organizations that are on premises or have hybrid, right? That's really where customer-driven comes into play. The IT admin or the partner can initiate the upgrade using the tools in our Skype for Business and Teams Admin Center or PowerShell. This is available to any organization. The IT admin or the partner can selectively upgrade the users at whatever pace works for them. And of course, you can choose to downgrade at any time If you go ahead and assign a user Teams only mode and you're like, oh, we're not ready to do that yet, you can just assign them a different mode to essentially roll them back from the Teams only mode perspective. You would, of course, want to take advantage of all of the various planning mechanisms that we've talked about in our previous trainings that are part of this series on Skype for Business to Microsoft Teams. The Microsoft Facilitated Automated Upgrade is intended for customers that have limited or no IT resources. This is exclusively for pure online organizations. So if you have an on-premises or a hybrid deployment, this is not a service that's available and not an option for you. The intent here is, in these select cases, Microsoft can automatically upgrade the entire Office 365 tenant. Advance notice is given out to administrators via message center, via email, as well as via the admin UI with subsequent periodic reminders. The intent here is that this is something that will occur for smaller organizations, typically under 500 seats in size, that have been deemed eligible for this upgrade process. And the eligibility is determined by engineering using a number of factors, not just simply the size of the organization, but also the types of features and functions that we currently have available in Teams compared to the usage of various features and functions in Skype for Business Online. Admins would have the ability to defer once prior to the upgrade. Customers should be providing notice to their end users once these notifications come out, just to give a little bit of a heads up that something is happening, something is changing, right? When this upgrade does occur, the entire tenant is upgraded all in one shot. Now, prior to the determined upgrade date, if there happens to be an IT admin in place or a partner admin in place, of course, they could use features of the customer-driven IT admin-driven track to self-migrate. You could make this available and do the upgrade however you see fit prior to the upgrade date. If for some reason the organization completes their upgrade, but there's a challenge or some type of deficiency, the organization can request to be downgraded by Microsoft support. This slide shows a summary of the tracks that we looked at, the customer-driven versus the Microsoft facilitated, and a little bit of a breakdown between the items that we've covered on the previous detailed slides. Now let's look at the admin experience itself inside of the Skype for Business and Teams Admin Center as well as PowerShell. So where do we go to set the coexistence mode? Well, the first example we're going to look at here is how we set the coexistence mode organization-wide. And the easiest way to do this is through the Microsoft Teams Admin Center. Now you can see in my screenshot here, if I navigate down on the left-hand side and expand the org-wide settings blade, I can select Teams Upgrade. This will now allow me to select the coexistence mode that I would like to use for this entire organization. Now that's a key point to realize here. The option that you select here will apply to your entire company. So if I were to select islands, as I have in this particular example here, then all of my users would be placed in side-by-side mode, allowing them to utilize both the Skype for Business and the Teams application itself. As you can see in this screenshot, each of the 5 coexistence modes are there, so you'll have the opportunity to select whichever coexistence mode is appropriate for your organization. By default, the coexistence mode is set to islands. Now, if you remember from our previous trainings, you'll recall that there's an option that you can set from an administrative standpoint that will set a notification for the user in the Skype for Business client, indicating that an upgrade to Teams is coming. Now in the screenshot, you can see I'm in the Microsoft Teams Admin Center. I've navigated down into my org-wide settings to the Teams upgrade blade. And the setting that I want you to take a look at is right here. This notify Skype for Business users that an upgrade to Teams is available. This particular setting goes hand in glove with the coexistence mode that's selected. And this is what actually enables the option that you see in the Skype for Business client, or the banner, I should say, that you see in the Skype for Business client. By toggling this setting to on, this will cause the corresponding banner to show in the Skype for Business client, giving the user a heads up that Skype for Business will be upgraded to Microsoft Teams. Now, when we're ready to perform the upgrade to Teams only mode for the entire organization, we can very easily do that by coming into our Microsoft Teams Admin Center, again navigating under our org-wide settings to Teams upgrade, and selecting the coexistence mode of Teams only. Now, a couple of things that I want you to be aware of here. First and foremost, when I set the coexistence mode to Teams only, you'll notice that the Notify Skype for Business toggle is set to off. This is by design because if you think about it, when the coexistence mode is Teams only, the user wouldn't have the capability of leveraging their Skype for Business client outside of the optimized meetings experience that we give them. So there's really no reason to notify them because they wouldn't be in the Skype for Business client anymore. By simply selecting Teams only from this drop-down box, this is effectively saying that we would like to now move our entire organization to utilize only Microsoft Teams. Now, when I click the Save button that's down at the bottom here, I'm actually going to get an attestation prompt that comes up from the Teams Admin Center. This attestation prompt is effectively letting the admin know that you are making a change that is going to affect your entire organization. Unless you've set explicit per user upgrade policies, this is going to affect everyone in your org. And you need to ensure that you are ready for this change. You will then need to tick this little checkbox that we see here to state that you actually understand what's happening, and only then will you be able to click Save and have this take effect. This is an important piece of the puzzle because if you accidentally set this mode, you could disrupt your entire organization because you've flipped them over to Teams when you actually weren't ready to do that. Now, in addition to setting this at the organizational level, you can also set the coexistence mode on a per user basis. This is also done through the Teams Admin Center. You can see on the left-hand side, if I navigate to the user's blade, indicated by the number 1 that you see on the slide here, right there, right? If I navigate to this user's blade, and then I find a particular user, in this case, I found Adele as my user, and I look at the properties of that user, there'll be a section in the bottom right that indicates the Teams upgrade mode that is currently assigned to this user. If I were to click Edit, noted by this number 2 here, brings up the flyout blade that you see on the right here. And this is where I can choose the various coexistence mode that I would like to apply to this particular user. So this could be advantageous where perhaps you're testing as part of your pilot process. Maybe the entire organization is in islands mode, but you're ready to upgrade Adele so that she can test out some of your use cases as a Teams only user. You can simply select the dropdown, select Teams only, and away we go. This particular user will have that coexistence mode assigned. As you can see in the dropdown, all of the expected coexistence modes are there. Additionally, there's also the Use Org-Wide Settings option. This is actually what's selected by default, which essentially means that the user setting is inherited by whatever you've set at the tenant, but this gives you the opportunity to override that setting on a per user basis. As we saw earlier in the org-wide settings, I do have the opportunity to configure notifications for the upcoming upgrade. I can also do that on a per user basis as well. So same idea as we saw on our last slide. If I navigate into the Teams Admin Center, select the user's blade, find a particular user, navigate down under the Teams upgrade section and click edit, I'll be brought to this flyout blade like we saw on the previous slide where I was able to pick the coexistence mode. Once I've selected a coexistence mode for this user, such as islands, I'll then have the opportunity to toggle this notify switch. That will enable that particular notification banner, just as we saw before for the org-wide settings, but this will allow you to do it on an individual user basis. This slide shows the PowerShell reference for how you would set a coexistence mode utilizing PowerShell. Now, of course, you can still do all of this through the Microsoft Teams Admin Center if you so desire. But the advantage of PowerShell gives you the power of scripting, where you could do this in bulk. Currently, at the time of this recording, we don't have a great way to assign these various coexistence modes to a batch of users through the Teams Admin Center itself. But if you wanted to do that through PowerShell, you would have the capability of leveraging the PowerShell commandlets that you see here. Now, I've given some examples on the right-hand side here of how you could set PowerShell per user. There are also ways that you can use these same commandlets to set the PowerShell or to set the coexistence mode, excuse me, for the entire tenant if you so desire. Let's recap our key learnings from this training. Administrators can self-serve the upgrade process or take advantage of the Microsoft facilitated upgrade process if certain conditions apply. The coexistence modes can be assigned through either the modern portal, also known as the Skype for Business and Teams Admin Center, or through PowerShell. And these coexistence modes can be applied on a per user basis or tenant-wide. Be sure to check out the other trainings that are part of this series of the Skype to Teams upgrade. Thank you for attending this session.